Here recently I've been telling a lot of dark tales. Stories about death, the unknown, and even pure evil. So tonight I thought I'd tell a more lighthearted story. And before I begin, I should mention this is not one of Aesop's fables. If you were thinking it was, don't press the dislike button. I told you right now. This is actually a true story about a little turtle that made his way across the ocean in search of his mother. And since it runs a little long, I'm just gonna go ahead and begin. The mother turtle made her way across the sand of the beach. The heavens were twinkling with stars up above her, and as she walked she would occasionally stop and make a little hole in the ground and lay her eggs. Then she would cover them up and go and make another hole. And soon she had laid 1,000 eggs on that beach and was headed back towards the ocean. But before she left, she turned her head and she whispered to them, "Rest easy, my children." And then she was swallowed up by the waves. Well, morning soon came, and the little turtles began to poke their heads out of the sand to look out into the bright sun and the entire world that was in front of them. And one little turtle that popped his head out came to a thought. He began to believe that his name was Joey, and soon he felt quite certain of it, absolutely positive, so certain that he would have died knowing that his name was Joey. But he realized that all the other little turtles were beginning to have similar thoughts. One popped up and said her name was Sarah, another big bulky one said his name was Michael, and a little tiny one said his name was Timothy. Well, anyways, they all began looking around, and Joey said, "All right, look up above you, everyone." And they looked up and they saw a bunch of seagulls circling overhead. "Those creatures are going to eat us unless we hurry to the ocean. So quick about it. There's strength in numbers." Anyways, they all began running, although Timothy wasn't exactly sure how Joey knew the seagulls were going to eat them. But he turned out to be right. The seagulls came down and began to grab hold of the turtles and lift them up into the sky. And soon Sarah was taken away, as well as Michael was almost taken away, actually, but he did manage to make it into the ocean. But Joey was one of the last of them to survive, around 50. And as he turned to Timothy, he said, "Timothy, you must—" But he never did finish his sentence, for the seagull picked him up and carried him up into the sky. Well, anyways, Timothy was rather frightened. But as he was trying to get to the ocean, he suddenly had a thought. "Why don't you go back towards the forest?" And the moment he thought this, he realized that it was true. He started to move the other way. And it ended up that going against his instinct like this, going against the man in black, was the very thing that saved his life. For all the seagulls were so busy picking up the turtles and lifting them up into the sky, they didn't notice Timothy as he headed towards the forest and made his escape. Well, Timothy, he lumbered along, and he was crying because he felt that this world was so cruel and wasn't as safe as his little egg underneath the sand where it was all warm and cozy. And as he was crying, he heard a voice behind him. "What's wrong, little one?" He turned around to see a most beautiful sight. There was a butterfly on the branch above him, and the butterfly was yellow and had black tips at the ends, and it was looking at him lovingly. And Timothy said, My brothers and sisters, they were all taken up by these monsters." And the butterfly said, "Oh, well, you're safe here, my child. This is a place where no talking animal can eat another talking animal. In fact, over by that tree, just right around it, there's a coral bar, and there you can find old Moses, and he might be able to help you out." And Timothy said thank you to the creature, and that he was glad that such beings existed in such a horrible place as all this was. But anyways, he set off, and he was very slow, but he ended up coming to the bar. And this bar had the most humongous open doors. It was so large that any animal could get through them. And he lumbered in, and he saw all of these creatures, way beyond anything that he could have imagined. There were birds and snakes, and there was this koala bear in a little shirt and a little hat that was asleep at the end of the bar. And there was a crocodile that was smiling at him, which made him a little afraid, but it didn't seem to want to hurt him. And then there was a kangaroo who was hopping around listening to some music that some dingoes were playing on the stage. And Timothy walked over to the bar and saw an old turtle there. And he said to it, "Oh, are you old Moses Turtle?" And the turtle said, "Yes, I am. What might you be wanting, little one?" "Well," said Timothy, "I'm very frightened. There were all these creatures that took up my brothers and sisters." "Well, you're safe here," said old Moses Turtle. "I'll go ahead and get you a drink." "But I don't have any money," said Timothy, although he didn't actually know what money was. "Don't worry about it," said old Moses. "Talking animals help other talking animals, and they don't have to have a reason, and they don't ever expect payment. It's just a tradition that we all here follow." And anyways, he made Timothy some water, and Timothy began to drink. But as he was drinking, he noticed that there was a bright brown furball that was dashing back and forth across the bar floor. And eventually it stopped for a moment right in front of him, and he saw that it was a hare. The hare was dressed up in a suit, and it had one wooden leg, but it didn't seem to make it any less fast. And the hare was serving beers and things, and the hare looked over at him and said, "Well, hi there, mate. The name's Trevor." And Timothy shook its hand. "Well, you seem to be lost. You must be one of Julia's children. Old Moses was a friend of hers. She usually lays her eggs around this time. But you didn't head off into the ocean." "No," said Timothy. "For some reason I thought to myself that I shouldn't, that would mean that I'd die. But tell me, Hare, how is all this possible? How are all of us talking and thinking like this?" And Trevor shrugged his shoulders. "Nobody really knows. We just decided one day that we'd do it. But come now, my friend, you must be pretty poor off. You don't have anywhere to go. Old Moses Turtle," he said, "why don't you let him live here and work here? I could use another hand around the place." And old Moses said, "Why, that sounds like a great idea. I'm rather slow anymore. I could use some help." And so it was agreed upon, and Timothy was thrilled by this. He got to see all sorts of creatures and hear all sorts of stories about the man in black and the man in gray and the man in white and all sorts of other things. But one day as he was working, he heard two koala bears talking, a father and a son. And the father was telling his son how much he loved him, and how he hoped they could come to this bar and sit and have drinks together for a very long time. And as he listened, Timothy thought to himself how much it would be nice to love. And so one day he walked up to old Moses Turtle and said, "Moses Turtle, I was hearing some koala bears talking yesterday, and I thought to myself, did Julia love me?" And old Moses Turtle said, "Well, I should say not. Turtles are incapable of love. It's one of the rules set down by this universe, and a good one, too." Trevor the Hare happened to be a believer in the man in white, and he listened to this and rolled his eyes. He didn't like the teachings of the man in black, and he said, "Now listen here, Timothy. You love me and you love Moses Turtle, right?" "Yes," said Timothy. "Well, then there you go. Turtles can feel love." "Then that means my mother must love me," said Timothy. "Oh, I must go find her." And Trevor said, "Well, I don't know about that, my boy. She could be anywhere." And old Moses Turtle said, "Yes, but I happen to know the region that she frequents most often. Neptune's castle. It's out there in the reef somewhere. I suppose the two of you could head off there and try to find her." "Well, I can't do that," said Trevor, who was beginning to make excuses. "You see, I got to take care of the bar and everything." "Oh, don't worry about that," said old Moses Turtle. "I have some friends that could help us out for a little while if you all would like to take a holiday." Well, Trevor thought about this and said, "You know what, I could use a break. How about you, Timothy?" "Oh, yes, I really must see my mother." "And I," said Trevor, "would feel quite honored to help you out, my boy. Come on." And so Trevor got themselves a boat. The old schooner is what he called it. It was a motor boat that he had rented from some friends. And anyways, Trevor explained how it would work, how they would go across the shores until they reached the barrier reef. Trevor said, "I wouldn't feel safe for you to go alone. After all, there's all sorts of creatures out in that sea. You might get eaten up. It'd be much safer if we took a ship, and much quicker," said Trevor, for Timothy would go quite slow across the ground, of course. But anyways, they began to pack belongings, food, and water, and things. And Trevor even brought some fireworks along, because he'd always had a weakness for them. He enjoyed things like that, fireworks and painting. All hares seem to. And anyways, they started sailing off, and Trevor was just sitting down and telling Timothy a few jokes about koala bears, and it was rather a stereotypical joke that would be a little bit racist to repeat, so I will not. But as they were talking, Timothy looked up into the sky, and he noticed a bunch of birds flying. And the bird actually the leader bird, let out a cry. "There you are," he said. "I've been looking for you for quite some time now. My name is Sebastian, and we haven't had our lunch, and we are going to eat you up. So come on, our lunch can't wait much longer. We're very hungry." And anyways, Timothy wanted to go hide beneath the seat. He was afraid of these creatures who had eaten all his brothers and sisters. But Trevor said, "Oh, I'm not afraid of them. They're just a bunch of flying rats." And he said, "You up there, you all should be ashamed of yourself. No talking animal should eat another talking animal. Intelligence is the binding force of this universe. To destroy a creature that feels love and hate is a crime against nature." But the seagulls just chuckled to themselves and said they didn't believe in all those old laws, and they started to fly down and attack the ship. Well, anyways, Timothy tried to fight them off with his oar, but they ended up grabbing hold of him anyways, and they ended up pushing past Trevor, and they flew up into the sky. Well, anyways, Trevor looked around, and he remembered his fireworks, and he picked them up, and he lit one, and he shot it off into the sky. And it flew up, and bang! And all the seagulls were frightened, and one of them dropped Timothy, who happened to be a little bit older at this point, so it was much harder for them to keep him under control when he was trying to get free and trying to bite hold of them and stuff. But anyways, Timothy dropped down to the ocean, and Trevor was very worried. "Little one, are you all right, mate?" And Timothy popped his head out of the water and said, "I'm fine." And Trevor picked him up and said, "Well, you gave me quite a scare there. I'll get rid of those things as soon as you can, those rats." Well, anyways, they continued on for some time. And Trevor would tell him stories about creatures that frequented up above in space. Beings that he said had great battles with each other, often for very stupid reasons, but also sometimes for very wise reasons. And as they were talking, Timothy said, "I just can't understand why a world like this could be so cruel, and yet could also be so beautiful." And Trevor said, "Well, I tell you what, boy, neither can I. Neither can a lot of us. But I'll say this, that when you're going through all of this stuff, when you're going through all this misery, the most important thing you can have is a friend. Love really gets you through the cruelty of the man in black. And I'm very glad to have you." "And I'm very glad to have you, Trevor," said Timothy. You are my best friend in the whole world." And anyways, Trevor seemed to be touched by this. Maybe he had never really known for sure if Timothy was his friend. But the two of them got along even better after this. But one day, a big storm rose up, and Trevor was afraid that the boat would be, plunged underneath the waves, so he decided to make camp for a little while on the shore. So they rested for a little while, and Trevor said he was going to explore and see exactly where they were, because he wasn't exactly sure. He didn't know how close they were yet to Neptune's castle. But anyways, as he went away, Timothy went back in his shell to sleep. But as he was laying there, he heard a voice, and he poked his head out just a little bit and saw that Trevor seemed to be in a fight with a bunch of other hares. "Oh, you get away now! Now you get out of here!" And Trevor tried to make a run for it, and he started to run away, but the hares were throwing their spears. And Timothy was about to come out when he said, "Oh, I don't have any need to worry. I'm a hare from the north. They ain't going to catch me, no matter what, even if I'm hobbling." And Trevor darted off so fast that the hares had to do their absolute best to catch up, but they were quite thin hares, so it wasn't too much of a problem for Trevor to outpace them, even with one wooden leg. Well, anyways, Timothy, he watched them go, and he wondered why they hadn't seen him, not knowing that he being in a shell, they had just assumed that he was a stone. But anyways, Timothy decided to set off and help his friend, but he was very slow after all, and it took him quite a while before he finally found the hare's camp. And he looked out from the bushes, and he saw that they were all gathered around, and they had managed to catch Trevor, and they'd tied him up to a stake. Well, anyways, they were all chanting and singing, and Hugo came up to the stage. Hugo was the leader of the Hares, and he said, "My friends, we are here today to honor the man in gray. The man in gray has given us this creature, I believe, as a test. And since he is clearly clothed and in the garment of the man in black, we have but one purpose, to destroy this creature of sense, and free the world, and bring about an age of nonsense." Anyways, they all began to cheer, and Timothy was very frightened, and he began to think to himself what he could do to help his friend. And then he had an idea. He let out a big booming voice. Excuse me, I am the man in gray, and that is one of my divine creatures. If you don't let him free, I will kill each and every one of you." Well, anyways, they all began to mumble amongst themselves, and finally Hugo said, "I don't believe a word of it. Go and find what creature made that noise." And the Hares all searched, but Timothy hid him in his shell again, and they just assumed that he was a stone, so that they couldn't figure out what was making this noise, and since they were so fast, they knew that it couldn't have been anything that was hiding in the bushes or hiding away, because they would have been able to catch up with it. But anyways, Timothy said, "You will free him immediately, or I shall kill you all now. I shall set this world in storm and fire, and it shall be the end of this earth." Well, anyways, Hugo said, "Well, we must do as he says, I suppose. We have no choice." But Arlo, one of Hugo's followers, said, "I don't believe a word of it." And he pulled out his knife, and he came running at Trevor, and he stabbed him right in the, in the leg. But as it so happens, he stabbed Trevor in that wooden leg of his, and he didn't notice it was a wooden leg because Trevor's pants were so baggy. But anyways, when Trevor didn't let out a scream or a cry or anything, all the Hares had no choice but to assume that Trevor must be some sort of divine being. Well, anyways, the Hares all began to honor him, and Hugo gave him a crown. And Trevor began to say, "Now I am a divine being, and I say that tonight we should all party. I shall have a feast prepared, and we shall all enjoy ourselves and dance in the glory of the man in grey." And so that was what they did. But as they were partying, Trevor was able to sneak off, and he went over to the turtle. "Now, my friend, I think I've got these fellows fooled. I'm going to go get some firecrackers from the boat, and I think that should really get them to believe that I am some divine being." "So, are you sure you're going to be all right?" "Of course," said Trevor. "Don't worry about me. These creatures are harebrained. They wouldn't know a fake if it stepped right in front of them, as it is right now." And anyways, Trevor said, "Come on, I'll take you to the ocean." And so that's what he did. Trevor took Timothy to the ocean and put him in. And anyways, Timothy began to follow his instinct now to Neptune's castle. He swam for quite some time, and he didn't see much. He was lucky there weren't any creatures that tried to eat him or anything. But eventually he did arrive at a beautiful reef of all sorts of colors and all sorts of sponges, and there were starfish, and he saw seahorses and fish of every single color, and as he was swimming, he began to think of himself that he must be getting close. And sure enough, he was right, for he saw a castle in the distance, and he began to look around for his mother. Well, he must have asked quite a while, and he ran into 2 or 3 turtles that turned out not to be her. But finally he came up to one and said, Are you Julia?" And the turtle turned around and said, "Yes, I am. And who are you?" "I'm your son," said Timothy. "I have become a very long way to find you. You see, I feel love, and I was hoping you might feel the same way about me. For in all this world, I've always wanted something to love me." And anyways, the turtle looked at him. "We turtles don't feel love, and you should know that. Now you go about your life. You have no business here." And anyways, Julia began to swim away, and Timothy was quite sad by this. But as he was standing there, a dolphin came up to him and said, "What's the matter with you?" And Timothy, who was crying at this point, for, he was a very young turtle, said, "My mother doesn't love me. I came all this way for nothing." "Well, I should think not," said the dolphin. "Turtles can't feel love. It's one of the rules set down by the mermaids." And anyways, Timothy said, "Yes, Wait, did you say mermaids?" And the dolphin said, "Oh, yes. Well, those creatures set those laws down a long time ago. And you would have a heck of a time trying to get to change their minds. Divine beings are very stubborn like that, believe me." And anyways, Timothy said, "But if I could get them to change my mind, then my mother could love me, right?" And the dolphin said, "Well, yes, I suppose, if..." And Timothy said, "Then that's what I'm going to do. I am going to head off, and I am going to talk to those mermaids." And so that is what he did. And we will find out whether he is successful another night. But for now, sweet dreams.